And a very pleasant good evening to everyone listening. It is Sunday, July 8th, 2018, and you are listening to a very special episode of the Connoisseurs of Wrestling. The first time we've had the whole gang together in the last 2 weeks. Thank you for bearing with us today. It's our Hall of Fame induction episode for the month of July. We have a very special show lined up for you here tonight. And of course, the show wouldn't be complete without the curator of the Connoisseurs of Wrestling. She's kind of our official historian, the one, the only, the incomparable Legends lover. LL, how you doing tonight?
Doing pretty good.
And we also have Taker's minion, her lesser half, but he's also the host of the show. He's also the godfather of podcasting here at the Cage Side Seats family of podcasts. Of course, you catch him every week on the Shooting the Breeze show, Saturday mornings. Taker, it is Basho time, my friend. Sumo has begun.
Yes, it has, and it was a great night last night. I hope we get some more greatness out of both out of our favorites there. In his new Mawashi nomad, no less.
He did good last night. He did really good. Looking fly too in that new get up. So
royal blue or purple, whatever you want to call it, Mawashi. He's part of the royalty now. If you think about it in the ranking structure,
so
yeah, so it fits.
There you go. Yeah, we got Tochinoshin. He's looking to compete for his second Basho of the year. Of course, he won one. I believe it was the winter Basho,
and then he doing January's.
Yeah, and then he finished runner-up in the most recent one in May. So, looking for good things for him. If you're a sumo fan, it's a great time of year for it. The July tournament just got started last night. It's going to be continuing for the next 14 days.
In the hottest venue at the hottest time of year.
Hey, there we go.
Yep, that venue has very, very poor air conditioning, they say. And if you noticed last night on the stream, all the fans that the fans had, you could, because they distribute white fans to the people that show up because it's so warm.
Yeah, it was quite noticeable, everybody with the fans yesterday. But you know what? It's an eclectic atmosphere. It's a really beautiful venue, real classic old school feel to it. So if you're a sumo fan, definitely check that out. Of course, we here, the Connoisseurs of Wrestling, are connoisseurs of all things professional wrestling. And of course, one of the big features on our show that we've been handling over the last couple of months is the Connoisseurs of Wrestling Hall of Fame. Bobby Heenan and Bruno Sammartino were the first inductees into our Hall of Fame that covered the months of May and June. We do one inductee every month. Now, this is going to be an interesting one because this one induction for the month of July does not cover just one person. It covers three people. And there's a reason for that, which, of course, we could highlight here in just a moment. But first, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping for the August Hall of Fame induction episode. And of course, if you've been following the show and you've been patroning Cage Side Seats, you know that the August induction ceremony for the Connoisseurs of Wrestling Hall of Fame is the fan selection series. The fans of the show are choosing the inductee for the month of August. That show will be on Sunday, August 5th. If you've been following along at Cage Side Seats, of course, we've been having 4 groups of 5 wrestlers each. Group A was won by the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Group B won by the Macho Man Randy Savage. Group C won by the American Dream Dusty Rhodes, and it would appear that Group D, the Group of Death, will be won by Stone Cold Steve Austin. Next week, the ballot will be going out, the final ballot for the August Hall of Fame inductee show, where you will get a chance to vote on who you want to see covered for our August Hall of Fame show. So be on the lookout for that at Cage Side Seats. If you have not voted, you still have a little bit of time. Steve Austin has a little bit over 50% of the vote right now, so unless there's a late surge for The Undertaker, it looks like Austin's going to win Group D. And then, of course, next week, the final 4 will be on the same ballot, and we'll kind of get into all of the voting procedures next week. That'll be taking place both here on the show and at Cage Side Seats. We'll give you all the information. A little bit more housekeeping note. We have a special episode of the Connoisseurs of Wrestling coming up in the middle of this week. We're kind of playing catch up. Very special episode. A man near and dear to our hearts. Taker, I know you love him. We're going to have a special look at the one and the only William Moody, a.k.a. Percy Pringle, a.k.a. Paul Bearer.
That's right.
One of the great wrestling managers. He'll be covered on a special midweek episode of the Connoisseurs of Wrestling. Next Sunday is, of course, the Extreme Rules pay-per-view. So we will not be broadcasting live next Sunday night. We'll be coming at you with a special taped episode that'll be released Monday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern over at Cage Side Seats. Of course, you can check out all of our shows in our archives here on YouTube. Just pound that subscribe button, click on our channel link. It's got all sorts of good stuff for you. And we got some more good stuff for you tonight. Of course, if you were following along in the month of June, we were honoring the great wrestling families. 2 weeks ago, we had the final 3 of our top 10 countdown. But of course, there was one family that was, shall we say, noticeable by their absence. And there's a big reason for that. We wanted to honor a family as July inductees, and we could think of no better family to honor than the Rhodes family. The American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, Gold Dust, a.k.a. the natural Dustin Rhodes, and, of course, Cody Rhodes, who's making quite a name for himself on the independent scene right now and in Ring of Honor / New Japan. The Rhodes family, guys, it's a very, very interesting family to study, not just because of the history that has been forged, but because it's such a dynamic family that's still active. You still have Dustin and Cody very much active. Cody really in the prime of his career right now. In Dusty, you have, a tremendous legend, one of the all-time greats. Dusty, of course, will have a chance to be the first 2-time inductee into the Connoisseurs of Wrestling Hall of Fame because he has advanced to the final ballot for August. So Dusty's kind of getting a head start on some of the other people on the ballot. But, this family, we look at their accomplishments. We look at everything that they've done. We're talking about a family whose legacy stretches from the heart of the territory era all the way to the very present day. And Taker, I'm going to start with you because I know you have some strong feelings on this particular family and especially the American Dream. You grew up watching him. Kind of talk to us a little bit about what you think of when someone mentions the Rhodes family.
Well, the first person I think of course, is Dusty. He made an impression on me as a heel when I first saw him back in the mid-'70s as a 7-year-old kid. 6-7-year-old kid, and he was someone that always kept my attention. There was just something about him. Didn't like him because he was going after my two favorites in the Bruiser and the Crusher in Chicago all the time. But after we moved to Phoenix, I kind of dropped away from wrestling for a while. All I could see was the occasional magazine, and somewhere along the line he turned face. Don't know when, don't know where. But when I got reconnected heavily with NWA, it was when I had TBS, the Superstation out of Atlanta. And I heard the name, it's going to go to commercial break and we'll be interviewing Dusty Rhodes next. And I'm like, why you want to talk to that bastard? Yeah, I'm 16 years old at this point, and it's like, why do you want to talk to that bastard for? I soon found out why they wanted to talk to him because he became a very, very popular face. He went from being one of the Texas Outlaws to the American Dream somewhere in that span. And, he played well off of his son of a plumber, son of, he said he was digging ditches at 8 years old, and all the stuff he would say, all his catchphrases. I dined with kings and queens, and I've slept in alleys eating pork and beans. It's like no one could talk like him. Not even Ric Flair. Ric Flair was a good talker, but Dusty would outshine him. And it was just Dusty was the complete package. He took and reinvented himself. That's one thing I can say about him. Same thing with Dustin Runnels, Gold Dust, Dustin Rhodes, Dusty Rhodes Jr. There's a guy that has had several different gimmicks in his career. And it's rather interesting, to say the least, that he took a character that, I would say the same thing happened to his father. When he came to WWF, Vince put him in polka dots, and everybody thought it was a rib. And I'll be damned if Dusty didn't get it over. He took what he was given and got it over. Dustin, same thing. He was given that character of Goldust. He swears up and down it's not a rib. He looked at it as a challenge. He wanted to get away from his father, which all kids want to do. And let's see, he became Goldust during the middle or early 90s? I can't remember exactly when.
I think it was between 95 and 96 is when he would make his official debut as Goldust. He did have some guest spots as Dustin Rhodes early on in the 90s. Goldust right. In 95, I believe.
Okay. And here it is, 2018. 23 years later? And Goldust is still over.
Yep, over 2 decades.
Yeah, and that tells you the longevity of the family.
And he also says in an interview that he wouldn't go back to being Dustin Rhodes. He is going to stay as Goldust. He loves the character.
Yeah, most of his successes come as Goldust.
Yep, he loves the character and he has fun. He said he has fun doing it.
He does. He enjoys it. He's 49 years old right now, and having a resurgence in his career as Goldust. I mean, yeah, he's a comedic person, but you know what? He's made it work.
He's still one of the best active wrestlers on the roster in terms of like old school classic work. He's still one of the best they have in short doses, even at his age.
Yeah. I would put him, everybody knows how much of a fan I am of The Undertaker. And, there's another one, 50, he's 53 now. And he is, for his age and what his body's been through, he still gets around pretty good. I mean, yeah, they gotta start keeping his matches short because of his body. But all in all, his work stands for itself. Same thing with Dustin, Goldust. He is one of the premier wrestlers for his age group, I would say, and is someone that could probably, if he wanted to, take himself out of WWE and go succeed on the independent circuit if he felt the desire to, which I don't think he does. I think he's comfortable where he is, doing what he's doing. And Cody, on the other hand, is someone who is a lot younger. What is he? He just turned 33.
Yeah, he's in his early 30s, I believe.
Yeah, he just turned 33 in June. And he himself has had several different characters, and the last one was Stardust, which he never really worked very hard to get over. It was almost as if he felt that he was entitled to something when he was with WWE. He wanted.
It took him teaming with his brother to actually get him over.
Yeah. Yeah, he felt that he was in the wrong place on the card. This is how I saw it. He felt he was in the wrong place on the card. He should have been up near the main event like his father was. He felt entitled. He became complacent, and what he was doing wasn't working out like he should have. And he figured he could do better on his own, so he was able to get his release from WWE. And granted, he's realized just how good he had it in WWE, but Right now, he is succeeding on the independent circuit, and yes, ladies and gentlemen, sold out a 10,000-seat arena in near Chicago for his all-in show on the 1st, which now is starting to have talent pull out, which is kind of scary. There have been a couple that have had to pull out because they've been signed to WWE.
Well, I want to focus on All In towards the end of the show because I think there's an important connection with the All In show. That's one of the reasons why Cody is going to be talked about, because obviously Cody is still, and most of his career is still probably in front of him, unless he retires early. You know, Dusty, of course, is passed on now. Goldust, most of his career is past. He's in the twilight years. Cody is still kind of formulating his legacy. But one reason we wanted to talk about Cody in relationship to his family, and particularly his father, was the All In show, which we'll talk about a little bit. The promotional aspect that Cody is bringing in 2018 versus what his father would do in the territorial era. But I want to get LL to jump in here with an opinion on Dustin and Cody in particular, because we've had enough experience now to get a pretty good idea of their individual talents. Of course, Cody had a lengthy career himself in the WWE as a mid-card performer. He was also one of the more noteworthy Intercontinental Champions of the last 10 to 15 years before its mini resurgence under The Miz and Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose. He had a very interesting little run with Damien Sandow as part of the Team Rhodes Scholars. And he also had a very memorable feud with The Shield in 2013 with his brother Goldust. Goldust, we know, of course, from his time in WCW and now in the WWF/WWE. Would you be willing to say, LL, whether you favor Dustin or Cody as the best of the Rhodes sons?
To me, it was Dustin. Goldust did better. He had the passion for the sport. He worked at his craft, where Cody took a lot of it for granted.
Taker, would you agree with that?
I would absolutely agree with it. And that's basically what I was saying, is that at points during Cody's early days, he was, he was hot-shotted to the Intercontinental title, but he felt he kind of took advantage, or felt that he should be more of something, and he just basically took it for granted because of his name. And he's admitted this. He's admittedly said this. So this is nothing unusual. It's out there in the public forum that he has said that, he felt he deserved better than what he was getting from WWE. Because his father and his brother laid the groundwork, and he was trying to ride, quote unquote, their coattails.
Yeah. He wanted the glory without the work.
Yeah, he wanted the accolades without the work. So,
well, it's an interesting legacy that he left behind in WWE, and it's an interesting legacy that he's forging. And we'll talk a little bit about that towards the end of the show. We're going to kind of break it down here tonight. We're going to focus a little bit on each of the three Rhodes men, put a spotlight on Dusty, Dustin, and Cody at their own respective contributions to the business, because all three have such a different path that they followed. I think with Goldust, you're looking at really one of the great characters in the history of the business. Definitely one of the most exotic and one of the most unique. It's transformed itself a lot over the years. Goldust as a character has undergone quite a few transformations, but it's definitely one of the more memorable and noteworthy characters in the wrestling business. Dusty, of course, we're talking about someone who, in complete fairness, is operating on a different level than his two sons. I think it's very much fair to say that Dusty is the most famous of the family, and with good reason. He's one of the all-time greats. We're talking about an iconic performer. We'll be talking about him here in just a moment and some of his legendary angles from Florida and Georgia. Cody, Cody is the youngest of the three wrestling Rhodes men. He's definitely had some controversy in his career. Did not have the most harmonious of exits from the WWE, but he's also, inherited a lot of that entrepreneurial spirit from his father in the promotional aspect. We'll be talking about All In. We'll be talking about his work in New Japan and Ring of Honor and why it's important what he's doing outside of the WWE right now. But we do want to start with the American Dream because, quite frankly, it would just be, uncouth to start any other place. We're talking about a man in Dusty Rhodes who essentially redefined the wrestling business. When you're looking at the state of wrestling in the 1970s, we're talking about the heart of the territorial era when wrestling was divided up into little fiefdoms. And there was a small group of men who wore heavyweight championship gold that would travel around the country. Otherwise, you were pretty much restrained to your little geographic area. And you could move from time to time into different territories, but you would stay in those territories. Dusty Rhodes kind of laid the foundation for what would become the template in the 80s and the 90s. I think, when you're looking at the decade of the 1970s, we're talking about some of the best wrestling in the history of the business. Just looking at the NWA and AWA champions from that decade alone, you're talking about some of the best in wrestling history. Dusty Rhodes does not get brought up with the great technical workers like a Jack Briscoe or a Vern Gagne or a Nick Bockwinkel or a Harley Race. But Dusty Rhodes gets brought up because he is one thing and one thing above all else: box office. Dusty Rhodes was an international star in an era when there were virtually no national stars. Dusty could go anywhere in the country. He could pick his spots. He could do whatever he wanted to do because Dusty had the charisma, he had the gift of gab, and he had just this eccentric, electric personality that people gravitated towards. It was magnetic. Dusty Rhodes, very much in his own unique way, was the Hulk Hogan of the 1970s. And between Dusty and Andre, I don't think there's a bigger star in the wrestling business in the 1970s. You're talking about someone who's known in virtually every territory. There wasn't a territory in the country that didn't know who the American Dream Dusty Rhodes was. And, LL, we could talk about his work with Dick Murdoch and the Texas Outlaws when he was a heel. Taker, we could talk about his time in Florida, the famous angle with Pak Sam Nam that turned him into the American Dream. We could talk about his championship feuds with Harley Race, with Ole Anderson. We could talk about Kevin Sullivan, the feuds in Florida. Of course, you all know near and dear to my heart his run as the head booker for Crockett territory in the 80s, producing some of the greatest wrestling that this world has ever seen. You could go so many different places, but I think the one thing that stands out with Dusty above all else is just how big of a star he was. I don't think people today realize that in his own unique way, Dusty Rhodes was a bigger star up to a certain point than even Ric Flair.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's a controversial take to say that either.
No, I don't either. Dusty was...
Ric Flair would tell you that himself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he has said it.
Ric Flair, I have to give Ric Flair some credit here. Okay? Ladies and gentlemen, Ric Flair has always been someone that he'll tell you he's not the greatest in-ring worker. He doesn't have a lot of moves. He has the chop, the woo, the figure four leg lock, what he says he never won a title with. And, but the one thing about Ric Flair is he could bump. And he, even now, even after Dusty is gone, Rick still puts Dusty over. He still puts Roddy over. Everybody he's ever wrestled with or wrestled against, I should say wrestled with, because it's a two-man deal. You got to have a great dance partner to put on a great match. And that's the one thing a lot of people say about Rick is that he was a great dance partner. That you didn't, after 3 or 4 matches, you wouldn't have to predetermine anything. You could call things on the fly in the ring because Rick and Dusty both had a sense of what the crowd, how the crowd was reacting. They could play to that, and they put on some gem matches. And Rick will put him over even to this day. And that's a mark of someone who is good. And as a booker, the term Dusty Finish is a homage to Dusty Rhodes because he had some of the most screwiest finishes in matches that you'll ever see. You have some kind of outside interference or referee having to take a serious bump or the crooked referee. All that stuff was Dusty stuff, Dusty idea.
Let's just call it what it was right now. Dusty was the master of the cock tease.
Of the what?
Of the cock tease.
Yep.
And now get that image out of your head if you want to, but that was Dusty's big MO. I mean, I think we need to draw a distinction here about why that was so prevalent in the areas that Dusty worked. When we're talking about wrestling in the territorial era, especially in the 70s and into the early 80s, there is a sharp contrast between the Southern territories, which were mostly aligned with the NWA, and the territories that were more northerly, which you had, your WWF and your AWA. AWA is kind of interesting. I think in some respects it's kind of a hybrid of the two, but in the WWF in the 70s and 80s, that's what you would call a monthly territory. You would hit all of your big cities generally once a month. Like you would be in Madison Square Garden once a month. You would be in the Boston Garden once a month. You would go to Philadelphia once a month. And everything was kind of built around these big monthly shows. And you didn't have to do as much creatively because you were only running these, shows once a month. So, it was pretty simple to just build up a new challenger for Bruno or Bob Backlund or Pedro Morales, whoever was holding the belt at the time. And that's just how you did your business. And it was a successful model. The AWA, I think, kind of is a hybrid of the Southern and Northern styles because you had towns where they would come once or twice a month. And you had some towns that were run a little bit more frequently. But it was also kind of the same deal where, stories were kind of built at a slower pace. I think, in the AWA, it was common you got maybe, 1 or 2 big storylines a year during its heyday because it was just produced that way. That's just how business ran up north with the bigger cities. In the Southern territories, where the NWA was kind of king, you had, especially in the 70s and 80s, a confluence of territories that were around smaller cities. Atlanta, Georgia was a decent-sized city, but it wasn't as big as it would be. Charlotte, North Carolina, the anchor city for Crockett, was nowhere near as big as it would be. It was, nothing in the 70s and 80s. And then, 20 years later, one of the top 20 largest cities in the country. That growth exploded. But, in the heyday of Crockett, Charlotte was pretty much a small town. Atlanta was a small to medium-sized town. And you had Georgia Championship Wrestling out of Atlanta, Crockett, of course, in the Carolinas, out of Charlotte. You had Memphis, the territory that Lawler and Jerry Jarrett would run. They were in the smaller markets. World Class had Dallas, which was a big city, but they would do the spot shows in the smaller areas. Mid-South had a bunch of smaller cities to couple with New Orleans. The Southern territories were generally weekly territories where you would have shows in the same cities week after week. I can speak from experience with Crockett.
Hence the term, I'm sorry to interrupt, hence the term loop.
Yes. You had loops that you would do every week. Every week it was the same. You would probably work 6 days, maybe 5 if you were lucky, in a slower territory like World Class, but you were on 5 or 6 days and you would go to the same towns on the same days each week. In Crockett, Monday was always Charlotte. They would wrestle in the Park Center in Charlotte. Wednesday nights typically were Greensboro. Now, the big monthly shows would be in the Coliseum. Sometimes you would do Wilmington. Sometimes you would have shows in Gaffney, South Carolina, Asheville. You would do shots in Richmond, Norfolk every once in a while. But there was a regular rotation of cities. You were always in the same general marketplace because that's how the territories had to run down south. The reason that this, I think, is important to note is because in the weekly territories, especially in the southern territories, you had to be a bit more flexible creatively, and I think you had to be a little bit more charismatic to be on top for longer, because you're not drawing from a huge pool of fans each month. You have to bring in, a building full of fans each and every week. And you have people that are coming each and every week that know exactly what you did the week before. So you have to constantly up your game. You have to constantly reinvent yourself because you're going through material at a much faster rate than someone would in the WWF. So Dusty Rhodes, who spent a lot of his career in Florida and Georgia, made some shots in Texas, Mid-Atlantic. He would occasionally appear in the AWA with Dick Murdoch as the Texas Outlaws. Carolinas, you're talking about a bunch of areas here where he is constantly putting out new material each and every week. So when you look at the territories that he worked, you look at the career that he forged, you're looking at someone who is basically creating the template of a modern superstar. When you see Roman Reigns or Seth Rollins or AJ Styles come out on TV each week, they're cutting new promos, they're wrestling matches, they're pretty much having to do something new every single week, even though nowadays you get repetitive matches a lot. But they're doing something new each week because the show is weekly and it goes on forever. Dusty Rhodes was doing that in an era when no one else was doing that. Dusty Rhodes could do that in the 70s because he was that charismatic and he was that talented performer.
Right.
Dusty Rhodes was really the first modern superstar that really paved the way for what wrestling would become. And I think that needs to be noted because, by God, when you consider his peers, you're really starting to get the impression of how good Dusty Rhodes actually was.
Yep. I mean, if you look at it, Dusty's his in-ring, I mean, for his size, he was quick. I mean, that man was doing stuff, with his weight. His build weight was 289 pounds. Okay. He was a rather large man, and he wasn't overly muscular. He was heavy. And he would always say, my belly may be a little big, my hiney may be a little big, but the man could deliver in the ring.
Look, brother, I'm bad, and they know I'm bad, Daddy.
Exactly. And he had a flair for dramatics in the ring. And that's what would suck the people in. He would be sitting there getting his ass killed by people and come back. Hence the baby face, comebacks, you see now. I mean, a lot of stuff that's being done today, Dusty was doing in the 70s and 80s. And it's just amazing. And yes, you're right. He was the template of the current. He's a standard bearer of the current superstar. And unfortunately, there's no one that's going to be able to ever really hold a candle to him because Dusty is Dusty. Dusty's in a class by himself.
Well, even you think about it, what got the fans gravitating towards him wasn't us that he was portrayed as the communist. He was a son of a plumber. He didn't come from anything special. And they played up on it, and that's what people gravitated to. He was just your everyday Joe. And people like that.
Yeah.
That is so interesting. That's the dichotomy of Dusty Rhodes right there in a nutshell. Because like you just said, there's that common man aspect. There's the son. He's someone that people could relate to. The average fan would look at Dusty Rhodes and say, "That's a guy that I would go out and have a beer with."
Exactly.
That common man, that every man, because like in Taker, like you said, he did not look like a traditional athlete. He was a big guy. He looked like somebody you go hang out with down at the bar on Friday night. But you contrast his appearance and his character with his talent. There was nothing common about Dusty Rhodes. He was absolutely one of a kind in that respect.
But the thing is like they say, you could put him up against Ric Flair. Ric Flair is the opposite side of the scale. He's got the body for a sport. He's got the charisma. He's got the loud mouth. But he's flashing money. He's doing all the other stuff, the rich stuff. And then you got Dusty, who's a heavy-set guy that can run his mouth better than anybody. And he could wrestle. Yep. And people gravitated because he was just an everyday Joe, where even though people gravitated to Ric Flair was high and above everybody. Like he said, he's up on Space Mountain. So yep. you got your two basic wrestlers, but that are complete opposites of each other.
But yet put them in the ring together, and it was absolute magic.
Yeah. It was the Lakers Celtics of the NWA in the 80s.
Yeah. Yeah.
It really was. I mean, and they did a great job of crafting that, especially in Crockett, because they would each wear Celtics and Lakers jackets. Ric Flair was Lakers, he was Showtime, and Dusty Rhodes was the Boston Celtics fan. He'd wear the Celtics jacket. And this was before the Hornets. God bless you for the Hornets, but they played directly off the Showtime Lakers and Bird Celtics. That's exactly what that rivalry was in the 80s. And, Dusty himself talked about this on an episode of the Legends of Wrestling, which if you've never seen that in the Vault section of the WWE Network, you really should go and find some of those older episodes with Dusty talking in them, because he recounts some amazing stories. He mentioned in Florida one night he wrestled a 90-minute draw. 90 minutes with Jack Briscoe. And then the next night, he wrestled a 10-minute brawl all over the arena with Terry Funk. Yep. And both matches sold out. So Dusty, even though he wasn't the most athletic of big men, Dusty doesn't get enough credit for being, quite mobile for his size. We talked, a few weeks ago about the late Leon White, Vader, as being one of the best big men of all time. Mm-hmm. Dusty Rhodes is in this category too. Yeah. Dusty was known to get up on the top rope and throw some really heavy set cross bodies every once in a while. He would throw some drop kicks. He was a good big man, very fast for his size. He could brawl, he could talk, he could hang with some of the great technical wrestlers, because Dusty Rhodes was a force of nature. And
he was a force of nature and a freak of nature.
Yeah.
Well, and what helped Dusty too, what got Dusty national acclaim, one of the big things that, and people, and you have forgotten this, Biff, I'm surprised you haven't brought this up yet, is the 2-match series that he had in New York with
I was going
superstar there. Billy Graham. Okay,
well, yeah.
2 of the greatest talkers in New York. Okay. And Billy Graham will tell you he took a lot of his characteristics from Dusty Rhodes. He was able to talk and rhyme like Dusty could. He could, the man with the power, the man of the hour, and all that stuff that Billy Graham used, he got from Dusty.
Yeah,
he freely admits it. That's the thing.
Dusty actually helped and trained and worked with so many wrestlers to teach them what they could do, how to do stuff in the ring. It was phenomenal.
Yeah, and that was something that he did throughout his career. He was a big influence even during his heyday as a wrestler, and of course we know his work in later years with NXT. But Dusty was one of the best creative minds in the business. I don't think he gets enough credit for what he was able to accomplish. A lot of people kind of blame him for the downfall of Crockett, which, if you talk to some people like J.J. Dillon, who admittedly was a Dusty fan, but you have Jim Cornette, David Crockett even has weighed in on this, it wasn't so much Dusty's fault as it was a confluence of events behind the scenes that kind of hit at the precise wrong time. Dusty, yes, he booked himself on top, but we've gone over this with talking about Vern Gagne. There's a reason why people book themselves into positions of prominence, because you are the person you trust the most. And it was necessary to rely on people that were trustworthy in that era, because if you didn't, it meant your business. And so Dusty gets knocked on a lot for that, but look at all of the great stuff that Dusty Rhodes accomplished. And we're going to talk about some of his best matches and feuds here in a moment as we wrap up our section on Dusty. But the Dusty finish was definitely overused, but it was inventive in its time, and before it got overused, it was quite the interesting finish. Dusty created Starrcade. He came up with the concept of a supercard to be broadcast on closed-circuit television. That really hadn't happened on the level that it did with Starrcade. Vince Sr. and Vince Jr. had kind of dabbled with it a little bit in the 70s from Shea, but Starrcade was Dusty's baby. He kind of built Starrcade up. Dusty came up with the Great American Bash and the concept of touring shows, which, Ghetto will directly credit Dusty Rhodes for that business model. That's the business model of New Japan Pro Wrestling now. New Japan Pro Wrestling doesn't tour like the WWE does. They basically go on extended tours that are kind of modeled off the old Great American Bash concept. It's just kind of tweaked to fit their scheduling needs. But, the influence of Dusty's booking can be seen in New Japan today. New Japan is considered one of the best companies in the world for quality wrestling. He created the War Games match. My God, every old school fan from here to Timbuktu loves War Games. I'm a mark for War Games.
Speaking of War Games, what did you think of NXT's version?
Something, it wasn't... Okay. How there's Coca-Cola and then there's Acme brand Coca-Cola or Food Lion brand Coca-Cola?
Mm-hmm.
It was like store brand Coca-Cola. It's good, get it nice and cold, it's serviceable. It's not quite the genuine article, but it's good enough for what it is. I thought that some of the tweaks to it took a little bit away from the mystique that War Games used to have. But at the same time, it was special in its own way. The
only thing I didn't like about it, no roof.
No roof. I understood why they did it that way. They wanted the performers to have the ability to do the high-flying moves off the top, which that's more of a prevalent thing now than it was when War Games was first created.
I know, and I mean, it needs to go away.
It does. Especially in light of what happened last night in San Francisco, which, that's...
let's hope it's not the worst. Let's hope Oromu is okay. But I've looked at the video. It doesn't look good. It does not look good for him.
No, it's insane what happened last night. And that's exactly the mentality that gets people hurt.
Well, that's the thing. Dragon Lee... It's been said about Dragon Lee for a long time. Either he's going to hurt somebody or he's going to hurt himself. Well,
let's wish all the best to Hiromu Takahashi. Obviously, hopefully, it's not as bad as it appears. It looked like hell.
It looked gruesome.
Yeah, it really did. But as far as the War Games match goes, the roof, the shark cages, I could deal without shark cages, and it was interesting they did the 3 teams of 3 instead of the 2 teams of 4 or 5. We've talked on Shooting Debris My dream, and this is, my oh God, I'm trying to think of a appropriate way to sum this up. My dream War Games match in NXT would be a 5-on-5 match with a roof on the cage between the top stars of the original NXT brand out of Florida and the top 5 stars from the NXT UK brand that's being established this summer. I would love to see, just the entire show in November be dedicated to interpromotional matches.
10 out of 10 would purchase that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's going to happen because NXT UK is only just now getting started, and it's going to take
a few years.
Yeah, it's going to at least it's going to take at least 1 year, probably 2 or 3 before we get any sort of cross promotional work like that. I do think some of the NXT UK talent will cross over, similar to what Pete Dunne and Tyler Bate have done in the past. I do think we'll get some flashes, but one day it would be amazing to see the two NXT brands compete in a War Games match, to have like a mini invasion. The promos between Johnny Saint and William Regal, I mean, Jesus Christ, that would be outstanding.
Yeah.
And, having maybe Aleister Black take on Pete Dunne in a champion versus champion match, I would squeal with joy.
Oh, yeah, that would be a super card.
That it would be amazing. But you know what? That War Games concept that all of us old school fans love, we thank Dusty for that. Dusty is one of the driving influences behind what we now see in NXT. Dusty was one of the guiding voices that helped NXT transition from the talent show that it was under Vince and Kevin Dunn to the wrestling promotion that it is now. And I make no bones about it. I am very much an NXT homer in this regard. The WWE is sports entertainment. NXT is professional wrestling, and there is a difference.
Big difference.
A big difference. There's a difference in style, aesthetics, presentation. It is just absolutely, one of the greatest shows going right now, and Dusty Rhodes is directly responsible for that. We really owe a lot to Dusty in terms of the template he established for character work, his promo ability, the storylines that he came up with, the match variants he came up with, the concepts that have been adopted throughout the wrestling world. Dusty is transcendent. Dusty Rhodes is an all-time great. He's a legend, and he is renowned in the business for a very good reason. And I think if you've never gotten a chance to experience Dusty Rhodes, get on the WWE Network, get on YouTube. As a matter of fact, the very first ever War Games match is on the network under the War Games collection. I would recommend probably the best 2 War Games matches I've ever seen, 1987, the original, and 1992. And I think, talking about the greatness of Dusty Rhodes, this is a great time to segue into his oldest son, Dustin Rhodes, because Dustin Rhodes had a big part to play in the 92 War Games match that many people consider to be one of the greatest WCW matches of all time. And, when we're talking about Dustin, we're talking about someone who had 2 very distinct career paths. His work from 1990 to 1994 in WCW was dramatically different from what you would see in WWE from 95 to the present. And we'll get LL to jump back in here. LL, did you have any experience watching Dustin Rhodes in WCW, or was you more, tuned in with the Goldust character that he started portraying in around 95?
Well, I seen him in WCW. A couple of times that I seen him, he tagged with his father. He ended up being a tag team with his dad. And Dustin, I got him at Dustin Could Wrestle. the problem that Dustin had then is like some of the other kids did, is he was outshadowed by his father with the name. So when he came into the WWE and he came as Goldust, it was a complete reversal overhaul of himself. That you could not mistake him and his father at all. And I think he needed that to be able to come out on his own and show how good of a character, of a wrestler, that he could be.
Right. Well, if I remember, one of the first times I saw Dustin, if I remember correctly, he was a tag team partner with Kendall Windham. They were the Texas Broncos or something for a short time.
Yeah, they were tag team partners for a while. I think Kendall turned on Dustin. I forgot what happened.
Yeah, I think that's what happened too, yeah.
Yeah. Then Dusty came into the ring and talked to him and said, I would like to be your tag team partner. Will you be a tag team partner with your father? Because that question was asked in the middle of the ring in front of a huge audience.
Yeah. So, I mean, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you know, it's interesting if we look at the early career of Dustin Rhodes. He is actually one of the, I wouldn't say the greatest, but he's definitely one of those underrated tag team wrestlers in the history of the business. And we see flashes of that throughout his career, both in WCW and the WWE. Dustin Rhodes competed in some amazing tag matches between 92 and 93, teaming up with guys like Ricky Steamboat, Barry Windham for a time. Of course, he was involved in the aforementioned War Games match, Sting Squadron versus the Dangerous Alliance, in a match that I will never be able to praise enough. Dustin had a knack for tag team wrestling, and I guess it's natural that he picked it up because his father was such a great tag team wrestler with Nikita Koloff, Magnum TA, with Dick Murdoch, my God, the Texas Outlaws, of course, one of the greatest tag teams of all time. You know, Dustin had a really strong knack for tag wrestling. We saw it in WWE with Booker T.
I was going to say that was that is some of the greatest tag team matches you'll see in WWE during the period in the 2000s and early 2000s.
Goldust and Booker T.
Oh, so amazing.
Booker T and Goldust. Booker T and Goldust.
That was funnier than shit.
I mean, some of the earliest comedies, backstage comedy scenes you would ever see were with Goldust and Booker T.
Yeah, Booker T, and obviously with the lightsaber, of course, it's just tremendous. And Goldust constantly trying to be his toady, and then they developed a rapport with one another. And yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. That charisma, the connectivity between Dustin and his partners. You know, the Golden Truth had their moments.
I'm sorry, that's a tag team that should have really been something.
They should have gotten the B team level run, I think.
Yeah. I mean, they were never really given the opportunity to run with it. Which was sad.
Yeah, because it was fun. That was hilarious.
Yeah, R-Truth is a very underrated performer in his own right, but you know, Dustin, you know,
the thing about R-Truth, and I'm going to take a small little segue here and then circle back. First of all, and this is not a knock on what race he is, but he is so dark. And I mean, he could sell such emotion with his eyes alone because they are so bright. They're so prominent. You know, R-Truth gets over the slightly off his rocker dude just by his eyes. And
Little Jimmy and
Little Jimmy.
Conspiracy Theory. Awesome Truth. And
the thing about it is that He talks about it. R-Truth talks about it on one of the table for threes. That people were paying him to take pictures of him next to an empty chair. People wanted to know how little Jimmy was, and he would sit there and talk to little Jimmy at these fan meet and greets, and people would take pictures with this empty chair.
He grew up 5 minutes away from where I did, by the way. He's a local boy, so that's that Carolina goodness kicking in.
Ron Gillings,
yep,
great man, great performer. Period.
Yeah, love some Ron Gillings. Big fan of R-Truth, K Quick, as he used to be known. Ron Gillings, open invitation to come on the show and talk with us if you ever hear this. But Dustin Rhodes, he had that capacity to be just an excellent tag team wrestler, but at the same time that he made a career out of being a good tag team worker, we can't say enough about his character work as Goldust. Now, this is an interesting topic. It's a slightly controversial topic because obviously our culture has changed a lot since 1995. Oh, yeah. I think it's just one of those things, and this is beside the point. We'll get back on point here in just a second, but it's one of those areas where, even short term, 5 to 10 years, I don't think we realize how much society has changed because it's all been kind of so gradual and kind of blurs together. There's no mistaking, what Goldust was doing in 1995 is very controversial. It would definitely be considered not politically correct today.
Obscene.
It might be considered, by our standards today, some of what was happening was very, very awkward. But at the same time, there was a certain brilliance about the character. I can appreciate what they were trying to do. Now, that doesn't excuse some of the things that they did with it, but I at least appreciate the effort that went into it because it was a very radical character. It was a very unique, flamboyant persona. It was something that wrestling fans had never seen before. I mean,
the thing is they did it. It was on WWE Network. They called it something shoots.
Photo shoots, and Dustin Rhodes was on there. And he talked about it. The Goldust character, they brought that up to him. But they said, if you like it, you do what you can with him. Everything that went on with the Goldust character was Dustin Rhodes himself. The lingerie, everything. He came up with that gimmick. Oh, God, the Hollywood Baccarat Brawl.
One of the more interesting moments of WrestleMania 12.
Yeah.
What is it? The alley brawl with Roddy Piper and Goldust. That was Goldust's idea. A lot of this was his ideas, and Vince McMahon let him run with them, and he did great.
Yeah,
but at first he wasn't sure about it. And speaking of the controversy that the Goldust character caused, that caused a falling out between Dustin and Virgil. Dusty Rhodes. It's called a major falling out between the two.
That's something that's not really well known either, because you always heard about Dusty was always really supportive of the character. It's not how it started out, actually.
No, he did not like the character one bit.
Because he didn't like what the character portrayed.
Oh. Nope. It's.
I think they were estranged for over 5 years.
Yeah, but some of it not only had to do with the character, had to do with his wife
Marlena, yeah. Terry.
Yeah, there was some family issues in there too. So
Dusty could not stand her.
Well, we're not really. We definitely don't want to recriminate the family issues necessarily that went on behind the scenes.
I mean, I'm just saying that's something that that is a part of his career that has to be touched on. That's all.
Well, yes, and
But when they made up, though, Dusty finally embraced it and embraced what his son did with the character.
Yeah. And I think that's the tightrope that we're kind of walking here, because there are aspects of the character that would never fly today, and they shouldn't. But there are also aspects of the character that were revolutionary and cutting edge and really risky. And, Goldust, in a very real sense, was one of the first, I'm going to borrow a JR euphemism here, one of the first attitudinal characters that WWF created during this period. It was one of the first attempts to create something that was a little bit more risque and a little bit more mature. And, Goldust and Marlena, there was, a hypersexuality about them. Marlena in particular, Terry Runnels, she played her character to a hilt. The package that they had was tremendous. That was one of the understated mid-card feuds in WWF in the mid to late 90s. Goldust and Triple H had some amazing matches all over between 96 and 97. Of course,
but you also think of this. It was brought out at a time when sexuality was out in wrestling, but the opposite kind. You tried to bring Goldust now, feature him now the way he was with the lingerie and that. Even though with how people are this day and age, it would not fly. It would not go over. You would have too much controversy on racism and gay rights, everything. He brought it out at a time when anything provocative, anything that was outrageous could come out.
Well, it was still controversial at the time too. We definitely want to point that out.
Not as bad as it would be now. It was more accepted then. Controversy was more accepted then than it is now.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have the issue today with the SJWs.
Well, we definitely don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
That's all I'm going to throw out there about that, is that the SJWs, if Goldust debuted now as a character he was when he first debuted, the SJWs would be all over it, saying that they're minimizing the LGBTQ community. And
it's a tightrope. It's a tightrope between.
It's a fine line that they would be walking.
That's what I meant if it came out now. This is the first time we heard of Goldust. His character, his outrageousness, it would not go right now.
No.
There would be a lot of problems. But because he came out in the era he did, yeah, we had controversy. But people stormed for controversy then. He was accepted. And now he's accepted because this has been going on for years. But being brand new coming out right now, it would not fly. WWE would have so many problems right now.
It was a product of its time. It was definitely an ode to adorable Adrian Adonis, the exotic Adrian Street. It was kind of the exploration of the limits of those characterizations. We've talked a little bit about Adrian Street, Adrian Adonis here before. It was a product of its era. It was definitely an interesting character, and it metamorphosized, I guess would be the word. That's a big word for this late in Sunday evening. It changed so much from 95 to 98. Of course, the less said about his 1999 characterization, the better. When he went into the artist formerly known as period, that was some very weird stuff. I mean, he kind of dropped the overt sexual aspects of the character and just went straight into the bizarre. It was almost like a Cirque du Soleil performance on acid.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know exactly what he was trying for. It was the Attitude Era was a very it kind of thing. It was there. You had to you had to live through it to understand and fully appreciate the batshit insanity that was going on the program between the Ministry of Darkness and Gold Dust and the oddities and all of that stuff. He did eventually leave the WWF. He had a cup of coffee in WCW again. Didn't fare much better there, but when he came back to the WWF in 2002, things really did work out for him in the long run. He had a good run with Booker T. He would, kind of move up and down the card. Never was what you would consider a major player. He was never on the level of his father, but Dustin Rhodes did something that a lot of performers, a lot of second generation performers struggle with, and that's creating an identity of his own. Now, Dustin may not have reached the success that his father did in the business, but Dustin, through his character of Goldust, is, pretty much at that level of being a household wrestling name. You say the name Goldust, and people kind of know who you're talking about. There's the longevity of the character, his time spent with the WWE, his different runs with the company, former Intercontinental Champion, former Tag Champion. He just had a magnetic personality. He inherited it from his dad. Goldust, through and through, is what you would consider to be a success story in the business, because he took that second generation burden that so many performers are under, and he got out from under his father's shadow, and he made a legacy for himself, and that's not easy to do.
Nope. He actually remade himself. That's what he had to do from being Dustin Rhodes to Goldust. He did something drastic to get out from under the shadow. And it worked. The other brother, now when you hear Stardust, not a lot of people know who Stardust is.
Yeah.
The younger brother could not make a name for himself.
No, he couldn't, because as Cody, he had the name of Rhodes attached to it, which he was affiliated with his dad, Dusty, and as Stardust, it was a knockoff of Goldust, that he was under the shadow of Dustin.
Yeah.
And I will say this much: the Stardust character never really worked.
No, it didn't. Definitely not.
And it was a play on Goldust.
Yes.
Lightning is not. They got lightning in the bottle with Goldust. I mean, he's transcendent. He's got over 20 years as the character. Almost 25 years as the character of Goldust in one form, one shape or form of another. All right.
Yeah.
Cody should have came into the WWE when he did under a completely different name. He should not have been affiliated with Rhodes or anything of that nature. It should not have come out at all in the beginning. Dead hamstrung him.
But also his own attitude did.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, he wrote on the name. He figured things would be handed to him, and they weren't. At first, he started working for it, but then he stopped working for it.
Once he got he had the Intercontinental title, and that's basically where he topped out. Well, and it was very early on.
And then you figure him and his brother got the tag team titles.
Yeah.
No, I want to jump in here because I'm going to take a bit of a different track from y'all on this. I'm going to disagree with you just on one point. And it's exactly what Ella just mentioned. The tag team with his brother Goldust in 2013. I was watching the product. I'm sure y'all were too.
Yeah.
Y'all remember this tag team. You remember watching it. This was kind of in a very weird period. 2013 and 2014 with the exception of the Rhodes family storyline and Daniel Bryan, were very, very bad for the product.
Yeah.
It was a depressing show to watch. It was so bad. Survivor Series 2013 was one of the most god-awful shows in the history of history.
Oh, they had one that year?
Allegedly, yeah. Allegedly, there was a Survivor Series. But this was in a really bad period, but there were two storylines that really stood out. Daniel Bryan, of course, making his ascent to the top of the card is something that a lot of fans will always cherish. But right underneath Daniel Bryan, and on kind of that same vein, there was a storyline in 2013 with Cody and his brother Dustin and Dusty kind of running afoul of the Authority. And for one shining moment, now I will preface it. I said earlier, Cody had a pretty decent run as Intercontinental Champion. He had a couple of decent runs as a Tag Champion. He was with Legacy, but he never truly broke out and really got himself over on a big way. For one moment in 2013, it really looked like he was about to break out. The angle that they shot with him and Goldust against the Shield, one of the best tag team matches in recent memory. It's almost a forgotten classic because of how bad the overall shows were during that period. But the Rhodes brothers and the Shield had some amazing chemistry.
Yeah.
And Cody in particular was getting very, very over. He was starting to get, you could sense that organic swell of support start to build up because Cody was able to cut that really fiery promo. And it was the first time that fans kind of set up and say, wow, he can actually talk. He's actually got that fire in him like his father used to. And then the family connection, it was a memorable storyline. It was an emotional storyline. And they capped it off with some great matches. Cody and Goldust, when it was just the Rhodes family, the Rhodes Brotherhood, okay? That tag team could have been really special. And they could have used that as a springboard for Cody. For reasons that I will never understand, right as that team was just starting to take off, they killed it.
Yeah.
They killed it for no reason. They broke up the team for no reason. And all of that organic support that was starting to build behind him, they just pissed it away. And I think, if anything, Cody had a right to be pissed off because they were onto something really special that they blew.
Wasn't that the time that him as Stardust started his stuff with his father?
That was a little bit after this period. This was after they kind of cooled off the team a little bit. I think we're talking 2015 is when Stardust and Goldust kind of had their big falling out with Dusty and stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, I will forever. I'm not a huge Cody Rhodes fan. I think that he's gotten a few more opportunities than he probably deserved in New Japan. I am very much excited about the All In show, which we'll talk about here momentarily, and kind of the legacy that he shares with his father in that regard. Not the biggest Cody fan in the world, but I will forever defend Cody's vitriol against the WWE because they really screwed themselves out of a potential big star. Cody's not the greatest wrestler in the world, but he's good enough to get by. He's not the greatest talker in the world, but he's good enough to get by. And in an era when there are so few people that can talk in general, you mix the family legacy versus the organic support versus his in-ring ability and his microphone ability and his charisma. Cody has charisma, kind of like Goldust does. It's manifested in a different way, but he has that charisma. He could have been a huge star for the WWE, and they blew it. But they blew so many stars. They blew it with Neville. Yeah. They blew it with Cody. They blew it with...
Well, with Cody also. Cody will tell you himself, it is not all WWE. He will tell you himself, it was him that also killed it. because he just didn't feel like working. He got complacent. He will tell you that himself.
Well, that's why I ascribe more of the blame to WWE because they created that atmosphere. Cody got complacent because he recognized that he was never going to get a fair shake. Just like 90% of the people on the roster know they're never going to get a fair shake. And I'm not going to segue too far off this because we could get off the reservation and go for hours on this one. But, I will forever, bemoan the fact that WWE had in 2015 not one, but two women that were considered potential all-time greats in Charlotte and Sasha Banks. Two can't miss future Hall of Famers putting out some of the best women's matches in the history of the company. And they somehow whiffed on Sasha Banks to this point. She became a star. She won the title, but they never really did right by her. They just whiff on people that should be surefire hits. And I'm not saying Cody is as transcendent a performer in his respective division as Sasha Banks could have been in hers. But when you just look at the list of people that just got ramrodded by WWE's incompetence, I don't blame Cody for not caring. If I got saddled with Stardust and had that super hot angle with the Shield just quashed for no reason, I'd say screw it too. I mean, it's on the performers to rise above their station, but it's on WWE to create an atmosphere where people can succeed. And that's a great time to segue into the All In show because Cody Rhodes basically got fed up and he said, you know what? If you're not going to make me a star, I will go and make myself a star. And we can debate the manner in which he went about doing it, but we can't really argue the success because he went from being a mid-card joke in WWE to wrestling for the IWGP Heavyweight Championship in San Francisco with New Japan. He's a former Ring of Honor World Champion, and he was one of the point men on an independent wrestling show that's about to put 10,000 people in a building in Chicago, a feat that hasn't been done in this country since the territory era, outside of WWE and WCW. Ring of Honor has never put 10,000 people in a building before, not to my knowledge. I'm fairly certain New Japan didn't do it over here.
And Ring of Honor wanted to do a show at MSG on Survivor Series weekend.
Survivor Series or WrestleMania, I can't remember which one it was.
Survivor Series, because remember Survivor Series over at Barclays in Brooklyn. Or no, it is better. No, take that back. It is the WrestleMania weekend. You're right.
Yeah. It was supposed to be. Yeah, it was supposed to be WrestleMania next spring. All right.
Right.
They were going to run an MSG, kind of running opposition to WWE, and they got locked out of the building for reasons which neither here nor there. But it's a testament to Cody's vision and his determination. We can question his talent, we can question his mindset in WWE, but we cannot question his passion for the business. And that's something that I wanted to bring up here at the end of the show today, because you look at what Cody and the Young Bucks are doing in Chicago in September.
We can thank Dave Meltzer for this.
Well, it's a page out of Dusty's book, though. I mean, you can feel Dusty's spirit all over this.
Oh yeah,
that self-promotion, that can do, that renegade attitude. That's pure Dusty. There's a connectivity between Dusty and Cody through All In. It's something that his old man would have attempted to do, and I think that's worth bringing up here.
I have a great comparison. All In is to Cody what the first what the hell was it? The first pay-per-view they did. We talked about it earlier.
Starrcade?
Yeah. All In is to Cody what Starrcade was to Dusty.
Yes, beautiful. Absolutely. Absolutely. You're exactly right. It's Cody's love. It's Cody's love for the business being manifested in this effort to do something, really spectacular. 10,000 people to see an independent wrestling show. That's something that hasn't been done in this country outside of the WWE in over a decade, over 2 decades almost. I don't even know that WCW was capable of putting in 10,000 people in the last year.
Their show at the Georgia Dome was like almost 40.
When was the last time they went to the Georgia Dome? Was it 99? I think?
Yeah, it was the match that Hogan Goldberg.
Yeah, I think that was. Yeah, they had their match. There was the Finger Poke of Doom took place at the Georgia Dome. I can't remember if they went to the Georgia Dome in 2000. I don't think they did. But WCW was definitely on the way down. It was having attendance problems in 2000.
Well, when you're giving away pay-per-view quality matches on network television, there's a problem.
Well, yeah. I mean, one of these days we're going to have to look at the downfall of WCW on its own episode, but the bottom line is
do a rise and fall type deal.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. And it's Crockett, the rise and the fall, everything else. But we can't lose sight of the fact. Cody is attempting to do something that only WWE has done in the last 2 decades. WWE can put 10,000 people in a building. Now they're having some struggles now doing it. Even WWE is struggling to fill Raw and their pay-per-views out. But this is something that used to be taken for granted. They used to put 10,000 people in the Omni in Atlanta or the Fort Hesterly Armory down in Tampa, the Civic Center in Minneapolis, the Charlotte Coliseum, all of these old school venues, the Cow Palace in San Francisco. We just had the show there last night. It didn't used to be a feat to put 10,000 people to watch professional wrestling. And those days are over. But you have Cody, who's got that old school mindset about him. He's going to promote the hell out of this show. And you know what? Whether you like him or you don't, you got to admire the hustle, because they went out and they achieved a major coup by selling out that building.
Yes, they did.
They did a remarkable thing. That was straight out of his father's playbook. And I think that deserves recognition, because especially at Cage-Side Seats, we talked with, some of the posters there. Independent wrestling is really starting to grow, I think. You have all of these different promotions. Of course, the British scene is popping. Lucha Libre seems to be making a big comeback now. The wrestling scene in Mexico is kind of popping again. You've got all of these independent companies: Evolve, Progress, Rev Pro. NXT UK is trying to capitalize on the British scene. Japanese wrestling. All Japan is starting to make something of a little bit of a comeback here. Of course, New Japan.
Not only that, you got to think of people are getting tired of the same old with WWE.
Absolutely.
WWE is starting to go downhill. People want variety, and they're finding it.
And isn't that something we talked about yesterday, Biff?
Yep.
WWE has a lack of what?
A lack of anything of merit going on.
But no, lack of competition is the main key, the main thing that they miss. They don't have.
They got nobody chasing them.
That's right. Nobody nipping at their heels right now.
Yeah.
And with what Cody has pulled off, I'm going to say this. 10 years from now, we're going to be talking about Cody owning a major national promotion that's going to be giving Vince fits, or giving the WWE fits. I can see it. I can see it in the guy. I can see it.
That's a bold proclamation.
He could do it if he puts his mind to it. Because right now, I was just looking around. Looked at the front page of Cage-Side. Cody's taking time off from in-ring work. Gee, I wonder why. It's only like, what, 6 weeks out from his show?
We're getting close. Yeah, because
September 1st.
Yeah, this coming week is going to be the midpoint of July. My God, this year's flying by.
Yeah, it's September 1st.
Yeah.
The thing is,
So he's got to promote.
the WWE, they're getting stale. Nothing new. Same old storylines. There's nothing new. And they can't keep the fans. They can't keep us interested anymore. All these other promotions are getting people interested again.
Yep. It's something we're going to have to watch for.
Yeah. It's going to be WWE's loss. They got to change with the times. And you're not.
Nope. And that's the problem.
It is a problem, and it is something that we'll have to be looking for in the weeks and months to come. Obviously, it's a very interesting time to be a wrestling fan. And you look at what Cody's doing, and it's very much a sign of the times. It's very much a product of the new school way of thinking about wrestling, but it's also a throwback to the old days.
Old school.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a throwback to the old school.
You got new school and old school coming together.
That's why I say Cody is going to have a national promotion within the next 10 years that's going to be competing and chasing WWE down, because he is going to make his promotion is going to be a hybrid of new school, old school, and it's going to be called. I would say it's going to be called The School.
That would be an interesting thing to watch. I will give you that. It would be an interesting thing to see happen.
If he's got the right business mind, that's the key. And so far, right now, he's showing he does. But this is a one-time. Right now, it's one time, but he's already talking about doing it again. So,
I think he has to do it again. You sell out 10,000 seats of that quickly, there's obviously a marketplace.
20. What was it, like 22 minutes, and they were sold out?
Something close to that, yeah. I mean, they sold out faster than New Japan did. So,
yeah. What is this? They got wrestlers pulling out. No.
Yeah, they've had Deonna Purrazzo who had to pull out.
Yeah, WWE signed a couple of them.
And I think that's what's going to kill that show in the end, is if WWE signs enough.
Well, I think
the quality of the product that he's going to put out is going to be not as high as it could have been.
I think what's going to save them in the end is they have enough talent from Ring of Honor and New Japan that are signed up that WWE can't poach. Some of the independent talent they might lose, but some of the bigger names like Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, Kota Ibushi, Okada, I'm trying to think of who else.
Nick Aldis.
Yeah, Nick Aldis, they're not going to poach him, I don't think, obviously. So, there's talent there that they're not going to be able to poach. I think they're going to be able to put off a pretty good show, but...
Problem is the ones that they're poaching, what are they going to do with them? You're going to find out later. They're poaching them just to ruin Cody's chance. They're trying to ruin Cody's chance. So they're taking some of the talent. But you know what? WWE ain't going to do nothing with them. That's what's going to be a problem.
We're definitely setting up over the next couple of years for a very interesting professional wrestling landscape. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing where things go. But, we can't look at where we're going without remembering where we've been. And that's why we do the Connoisseurs of Wrestling.
That's true.
We want to look to the future of where we're going, but we want to look at, where we've been in the wrestling business. That's why we do this Hall of Fame series. That's why we do the weekly shows. It's a love of the business. We love talking about this old school wrestling. And you were dealing with a subject here with the Rhodes family where, they've pretty much been an integral part of the wrestling business, one way, shape, or form, since the 1970s. And they're a legendary family that deserves a lot of credit for all of their contributions. They've got their detractors, they've got their fans, but at the end of the day, you can't deny their legacy in the business.
Well, you look at it like one thing you said, you got old school, regular school, and new school all coming together with these three individuals.
Absolutely. It's like a hybrid of all three with Dusty, Dustin, and Cody. And so that is going to wrap up our coverage tonight. We're obviously going to get some plugs here in just a moment. But first, LL, where can they find you during the week, contact-wise?
You can find me at Windstorm64 at Twitter. And sometimes I'm in the nightly and the daily on Cage Side.
Taker, where can they find you, good buddy?
You can find me on Twitter as well at Takers_Minion. You can find me on a daily and a nightly, although during the next 14 days, I'm going to be out of pocket in a nightly because I'm going to be too busy watching my man go to march to a championship.
Hell yeah.
In sumo wrestling. You can also catch me on Saturday mornings at 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 Central, unless we're doing one of the big four shows, which start an hour earlier, for Shooting the Breeze with my co-host, my crime partner from Japan, Mr. Dr. Senju. And Biff, where can they find you, of course?
I am generally over at Cage Side Seats. You can find me in the daily and nightly threads. If you see me in any other thread over at Cage Side, run. Because it does not go well for me generally when I navigate away. You can get me on the Twitter at Real Deal Biff. You can use the info box down below here, this video. We've got all the information out for you. Of course, you can find our show's Twitter address and our email there. Be sure to visit us at Cage Side Seats. Of course, again, a reminder about Group D voting. We have just a few more hours to go before the final ballot will be set, and that final ballot will be unveiled next week. So be sure to be on the lookout for that over at Cage Side. Got some plugs here. We'd like to throw out some plugs to all of the great content that our little extended family produces at Cage Side Seats. Of course, we have Cage Side Seats affiliated podcast. Brent Brookhouse and Ethan Page bring you the Bitter Boys Club. Stunning Stella and Enigma Aaron have Not Your Demographic. We have Keeping Up with the Kayfabe, Mark Riley, Jody May Esquire, and Jack King. And, of course, Bros Before Elbows with Anthony, Farron, and Tommy. Those are the Cage Side Seats affiliated podcasts. We got some unaffiliated podcasts. Of course, we have Two Guys, One Sport with Crazy Chris Colgan and George Curtin Jerker Atzaves. I want to extend a personal thanks to George for filling in for me 2 weeks ago. George, I really appreciate it. You did an excellent job. Thank you so very much. Fizzy's Wacky World of Wrestling with William Fitzpatrick. Want to give him some love here. Of course, my good friend Prince Moxley Lopez and Ambrose Alley handle the Violent Wrestling Podcast. That drops sporadically. Be on the lookout for that. Match Fixin' with Don Sal Cusmano, part of Cedar Bridge Media. Want to give Don Sal some love. Big fan of the show. Thank you, Don, for everything that you do. Wednesday Night Shooting, Tanya Rogers and Andrew M. Swift. Ringside Geeks and For the Love of Wrestling with Miss Monroe and her company of fans. We have the Ruthless Aggression Podcast, Metal Matt, bringing you the good stuff Friday evenings. Be sure to look for Metal Matt's next show. We have, of course, Conrad Thompson and Bruce Pritchard doing Something to Wrestle and something else to wrestle with on the WWE Network.
Quick programming note on that. On something else to wrestle with, this week will be their final show on the WWE Network. That was announced today by Conrad on Twitter.
Did they announce if it was the final show of the season or the final show period?
I don't know if it's final show period or final show of the season, but it said final show.
Okay, because the last I saw, they weren't sure if it was the season or the show itself, so we'll be on the lookout for that. But you can definitely check out their archives on the network of the shows they've done. And their regular podcast will still be continuing. That's Conrad and Bruce Pritchard. Love those guys. And Conrad also has What Happened When with Tony Schiavone. And Jason Solomon. Solomonster Sounds Off. Got to throw some love to the Solomonster. That's another great podcast to be checking out. Boys and girls, it is time to close up shop for the evening. We hope you enjoyed tonight's episode on the Rhodes family. Again, we're going to have 2 episodes this week. We'll be coming at you midweek. Looking like maybe Tuesday morning for a special look at the late William Moody. Next Monday will be preempted on Sunday by the pay-per-view, but we've got a very special show. Oh, my God, I'm so excited for next Monday's show. I'm letting the cat out of the bag because, by God, I love this show. I have a fetish for it. Saturday night's main event. We're looking at SNME. That's going to be our topic next week. And we got some great topics lined up for the rest of the month, too. It's going to be fun. It's going to be great. On behalf of my esteemed colleagues, Legends Lover and Taker's Minion, I am Biff Kensington, and you have been listening to the Connoisseurs of Wrestling. Adam Royce, your sports teams still suck. Thanks, guys.
Good night.
Good night. I love you, Adam.